Tommy Robinson's prison condition continues to get worse. Only one British politician so far has decided to speak out against this, and that is Rupert Lowe of Reform UK, and a new campaign to urge the United Nations and the Human Rights Council to look into Tommy's situation has now started. Welcome to Tutsi TV, ladies and gentlemen, your global news channel. We're going to be talking about what's been going on over the last couple of days. We have been reporting on Tommy's situation in Wood Hill prison. And since then, we have had more confirmation about what's actually happening. It's now Wednesday, the 19th of February. And as of Monday, Tommy's access to the prison canteen has been restricted. He's only allowed to have tuna fish, tinned tuna, for food. And he's also not allowed to obviously order food. But the situation gets worse, and we're going to be talking about what else is going on, because the United Nations, not that obviously anybody has any hope when it comes to this, but any sort of effort to inform the international entities is still relatively important, because by focusing on these sort of campaigns, whether if you go to the ECHR, whether you go to the United Nations, whether you go to the House of Commons in Westminster, even if they ignore this, you will raise this issue, the profile of the case, and more people will be talking about this. And I would like to think that we are doing our part. So myself on Tutsi TV, but also others around us are doing this. So Tutsi TV's reporter Niak Orbani went to Geneva, to the United Nations. And the idea that a lot of people have, and we've been urged to do campaigns, whether it's to contact the CHR or United Nations, and NIAC did a great job. There's an open letter that's now been delivered to the Human Rights Council, and firstly, we had him outside the UN building, Tutsi TV's Niak Orbani, to do this quick announcement. Then we're going to read the letter, because on the one hand, we've got this obviously to push the UN. Again, not that we have any hope. We have this to do. So Niak's gone all the way to Geneva to do this, right? But we also have other people, including David Atherton and others, who are also writing letters to the government directly as well. Again, not that the government will do anything, but it's still important to make the effort. Let's go to Niak first.
Hello, everyone. Today in Switzerland, Geneva, front of this building, United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, I, with the letter, behalf of the British people who care about the humanity, asking for take action for political prisoner Tommy Robinson, he's actually right now in bad condition in prison for no reason. Please take action and release Tommy Robinson.
So big shout out to Niak for being there on behalf of us, the rest of us, and everybody else, and concerned citizens of the United Kingdom. I thought it would be important to talk about this, to do this obviously, and mention what's going on. So let's look at the letter that we have obviously. This is the open letter to the UN, have been handed now to the Human Rights Council. Dear members of the United Nations Human Rights Council, we undersigned representatives of concerned citizens of England, the United Kingdom, write to you with a heavy heart and a sense of urgency to bring to your attention the alarming situation surrounding Stephen Yaxi Lennon, widely known as Tommy Robinson. As a public figure who has consistently exercised his right to free expression, Mr. Yaxi Lennon now finds himself subjected to conditions that we believe constitute a grave violation of his fundamental human rights. We implore your esteemed council to investigate this matter and take swift action to uphold the principles enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Mr. Yaxi Lennon is currently incarcerated at HMP Wood Hill, where he has been held in solitary confinement for 23.5 hours a day within a segregation unit, conditions typically reserved for the most dangerous offenders. As a civil prisoner, serving an 18-month sentence for contempt of court imposed on the 28th of October 2024, his treatment appears disproportionate and punitive beyond the scope of his offense. Reports circulating widely on social media platforms indicate that he is permitted exercise only twice a week, compared to 4 times for violent offenders, and is confined to a small cell for extended periods, raising serious concerns about his physical and mental well-being. Such conditions, we argue, contravene Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which prohibits inhuman or degrading treatment, and align with precedents that classify prolonged solitary confinement as a form of torture. That's according to the human rights. We acknowledge that Mr. Yaxilenin's actions, stemming from his vocal criticism of perceived injustices and his reporting on sensitive legal proceedings, have polarized public opinion. However, irrespective of one's stance on his views, the right to freedom of expression, as protected under Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, remains sacrosanct. His current incarceration and severity of his treatment appear to many of us as a politically motivated effort to silence dissent, rather than a fair application of justice. Social media posts from across England reflect a growing sentiment that is emblematic of a broader erosion of free speech, with thousands rallying in his support, as evidenced by the United Kingdom demonstration in London on the 26th of October 2024. So this is where the letter, obviously, and thanks to NIAC again for delivering this to the United Nations, says, we request this from the Human Rights Council. Number 1, conduct an immediate and impartial investigation into the conditions of Mr. Yaxilenin's detention at HMP Woodhill, with a focus on the use of solitary confinement and its compliance with international human rights standards. Number 2, urge the United Kingdom government to review his case and ensure that his treatment aligns with the principle of fairness, dignity, and proportionality. And finally, advocate for the protection of his right to free expression, which we believe is being unjustly curtailed through excessive punishment. The people of England look to your esteemed body as a beacon of hope in safeguarding human rights globally. We fear that without international scrutiny, Mr. Yaxilenin's dire circumstances will persist, setting a dangerous precedent for others who dare to speak out. We stand united in our call for justice, not only for him, but for the preservation of freedoms that define a democratic society. Niak Orbani, obviously, and say on behalf of everybody else. So again, big thanks to Niak for going all the way to Geneva to also deliver this letter. But in case you want more context about what's actually happening, the whole situation that we've been reporting over the last few days is escalating, and it's getting a little bit ludicrous. It's becoming not just politically motivated, but extremely petty. Let me give you some context. For example, the situation with his food, right? Woodhill Prison continue to refuse Tommy to have access to the canteen in prison. He cannot have access to the canteen to get basic food. He's unable to stock up on tinned food so that he can actually eat. They are forcing him into starvation. He's also not allowed to obviously order food. That's obvious, but he can't even have access to the canteen. No food, apart from the tinned tuna. Tomorrow's obviously this week's visits again cancelled, and phone calls cancelled, emails not going to go through. Now Tommy only just found that yesterday through a phone call that he had finally with a family member who spoke to him, and saying that the visitations that were planned in 2 weeks in advance, all that is now completely out of window. The reason I said it's not really just about what's been going on over the last few days, about the food situation and visits being cancelled and phone calls being blocked, it gets worse. In case you don't know, we now have another update. So Tommy had a little TV, because that's the only thing you could have, solitary confinement. Because obviously other prisoners, violent criminals, they have access to everything. So they can walk around the prison, they could socialize, they could have a job, they could do many things. And they also have the common room, obviously exercise, play games, all the stuff that they have. Tommy didn't have anything, right? So just in one tiny room as a civil offender. So they give him a little TV, right? And he was, until now, even though he wasn't really, the last time I saw him, when I went to visit, he said, I don't really watch TV because I'm doing other things. But that was a few months ago. So his mental health is obviously getting worse. So he has been watching GB News, okay? He's been watching GB News to stay informed about what's going on in the outside world. For unknown reasons, the Woodhill prison have decided to block this. He's now unable to watch GB News at all. They have removed GB News as a channel from his TV. It was on his Freeview and it's completely vanished. They've removed it. So he's now forced to only watch BBC News and Sky News and things like that. Crazy, right? And obviously Tommy's team said, given the petty and spiteful actions of the prison governorship, have they somehow removed the only channel that Tommy watches in prison? How petty do you have to be? What was happening if you were to continue to watch GB News? Was he going to get more radicalized by watching GB News? I mean, GB News is quite mainstream anyway. It's just another torture treatment. It's just to break him. That's the whole point. Now, others are also taking action. I understand, as I said at the beginning of the live stream, we don't really trust any of these organizations, but you have to make any effort that you can. You can't just sit back. And we're doing our job. As I said, Niak was there, and Niak Robani, Geneva. But we also have another good friend, David Atherton, who has been in touch with the government directly. And he's basically written to the Prime Minister, but also Lord Timpson, and this, which is the prisons minister, Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, and Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Minister. He's written this letter. Mr. Yaxi Lennon is a prisoner A2084CG, held at HMP Woodhill, where he is serving an 18-month sentence for contempt of court, a civil, not criminal offence, beginning on the 28th of October 2024. He has been in solitary confinement for over 100 days, an elapsed time of 113 days. I was contacted by the chair of Danish Free Press Society, who went to visit him on the 12th of February. That's only a few days ago, 6 days ago. Her comments included, this is Tommy speaking now. This is Tommy's comment. And by the way, these guys who went to visit him, they're not allowed to visit him anymore because they basically, the Danish guys have broken the NDA, right? He has lost weight and looks frail. He looks like he was previously released. Last time when he was released, remember? What worries us most was his expression. I have known people with depression. He appears to be suffering from the condition. The Danish guys also said, Tommy can't tolerate the isolation much longer. Things are going downhill rapidly. I've added, obviously, at the bottom, in terms of there was an interview as well on YouTube. Multiple people have been banned from visiting him, including his family. The United Nations Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners, this is the Nelson Mandela rules. Rule 44 prohibits prolonged solitary confinement, which is defined as any period exceeding 15 consecutive days. Anything more than 15 days in a row, according to the United Nations, is torture. One can only guess at the state's motivation in dealing with Lennon in this matter. I acknowledge he has committed civil and offences, but he should be afforded equal treatment in prison. May I humbly request that this issue is addressed at your earliest opportunity to ensure Mr. Lennon's continued safety and well-being. Ms. Sarah Olney is my local MP. This is David Atherton. I look forward to your reply. So David is also making his effort. Again, we're not really expecting the government to respond, but this creates more pressure and more pressure. And again, this is mostly about us using our platforms on social media and new media platforms like 2CTV to say what we are doing, to keep raising this issue on an international level. A lot of people must be aware and get informed about what's going on. And later today, I will be meeting with a number of people, hopefully, who are currently in London, including people like Jordan Peterson, Douglas Murray, and a few others as well. and hopefully I'll plan to speak to them later in person about what's going on, and if there's any other way to raise this issue, to continue to raise this issue, because you can talk about this one day and then you could just move on from it and you could forget about it, and that's what's been going on for some time now. Now again, big credit to Rupert Lowe, Reform UK MP, who, despite opposition from his own party and despite being warned not to talk about this, he's decided to speak out. He said, well, I'm an MP, I have my responsibility, and as a concerned citizen, he's doing his job. He's getting in touch with the government directly as an MP. They have to respond to him. And by the way, getting in touch with the human rights, we are now expecting a response from the United Nations Human Rights Council. Even if it's a generic response, we will get a response. And that's the key point. This is not a symbolic letter. And hopefully we will get some sort of, even if the response is basically no response, then it will expose the United Nations for not actually caring about human rights, and as they claim, right? But again, this issue continues. Aaron says, thank you. I know Trump and Musk are busy with the US stuff, obviously, yeah. But any idea if they can tee off something from the side of the pond, from the other side of the pond, yeah. Hole in one is a long shot, but if the fairway. Yeah, obviously, the tricky situation with both Trump and Musk is that as of January, they're now officially the US government. They're not just campaigners, they're not just activists. So they have to be careful how to approach this. Doesn't mean they couldn't, they can. For example, in official visits or phone conversations between the president and the prime minister in the UK, they can bring it up, but they can't campaign like the way they did before, because obviously conflict of interest happens. But there's definitely, they can do push for others to do it. Old woman says, I do have some concerns that if the prison releases Tommy into the main prison with all the other inmates, he will be too weak to protect himself. Again, there are alternatives to this. One of the things that we're trying to do as a campaign, and obviously I like to get people like Niak as 2C TV reporter involved, and many others, is we must review and reform the justice system anyway, but to a very specific point. Civil offenders shouldn't be in prison. Civil offenders, the toughest punishment should be house arrest. Okay, that's what it should be. And obviously those who are civil offenders, that you're still basically being naughty, you have to be punished anyway. So this is not really about just slap on the wrist. You can actually have them under house arrest. You could give them community service as well on top of that, and fine them. Look, obviously you could get them to pay a penalty charge, right? You could do all this stuff. They should not be in prison unless you are planning to build a new prison, a civil prison. Then fine, build a civil prison just for those doing basically soft punishments, and focus on that. Send them there, and that way you can actually send them to the main prison area, and they're all going to be safe. In the meantime, you can have a better condition for Tommy. So I went to visit, because he's in the isolation unit. It's literally at the end of the actual prison estate thing. You have to go through all these other buildings first, and you come out of another building. You have to walk in the courtyard in the prison inside, and then you go into another building, and then eventually you get, after like 3 or 4 doors and buildings, you get to the main section where he is, and then you go inside, then he's there, right? The problem with that is that there's a lot of space. There's a lot of space. Like they keep saying that the prison system is overwhelmed, right? It's because they are talking about the actual rooms and cells that they have, okay? But that's for the violent offenders. You can expand, and you can have those who are on the same level, soft punishments, civil offenders, to hang out with each other just in the same area. There's a lot of room there. There's a lot of also open space there. And you can at least give him more visits. He's a civil offender. He's not a criminal convict. So give him more visits. Give him 2 visits a day. I don't care, right? He's already on his own. So even if he's on his own 6 hours a day... Obviously, it will be more than 6 hours, but even if it's 6 hours, it's still a massive punishment, mental health wise. Give him his GB News channel back. Give him access to be able for him to do something, because they've also reduced his access to the gym for exercising. Okay, he needs to be more active. Any human needs to be more active. The whole point of the modern Western world is that we are supposed to be also taking care of the human rights of prisoners. Even prisoners, violent criminals, we still have to be careful about their well-being. We can't, I mean, one of the ideas I have is, for example, it's very harsh. Instead of having death penalty, those who should get death penalty, just put them in a cell, dark cell on their own, and just give them basic food. Basically what they're doing to Tommy, they should do it with the, for example, the pedos and all the others, right? But you can't do that because it goes against our standards of human rights. So we do care, apparently, as society and governments, they say we care about the human rights of even prisoners, but not Tommy. So why not? You have to bring back some sanity, which it doesn't really help. Victor Red says, unknown reasons. Yeah, that's about the removing GB News from his TV. Yeah, free Tommy. Ben says, can we get a copy of David's letter to send to our MPs, please? So if you go on David Atherton's X account, he has now posted the letter, well, the text of the letter. This is obviously David's account. So if you want to go check it out, David Atherton 20. If you go, obviously, the letter is also now on X. You can check that out. And he says, I wish people understood that Tommy's lawyers are doing all they can. It's the state of Starmer that stopped true justice. Starmer is an evil liar. So yes, last time I was in touch with Tommy's team, they did say this morning, the lawyers are gathering again to discuss the whole thing and find a way to fix the problem at least. We don't know what efforts they're going to make, but again, that's up to them. February 23rd, Nasrallah's burial held in Beirut. Many IRGC, Hezbollah, Houthi, Hamas will be there. This is urgent. Your thoughts? Yeah, I mean, they do that all the time. They have all these stupid funerals every time someone big dies, and nobody does anything about it, apart from one time when Mossad actually did their Pagergate. Anyway, that's a separate topic to this news story. Starmer assaulted the pub owner while being a prime minister. I don't think he did. Why is he not being arrested? I haven't seen any evidence of that. Could he be arrested when the government changes? If you have any evidence of this, please send it over. This might refer to the video from 4 years ago when Starmer was not prime minister. He was the leader of the opposition, and his security were manhandling a pub owner, not himself, but that was about the COVID rules and lockdown, which became a big story, but nothing actually happened, apart from shame on Starmer's team. Van der Volks says, the Attorney General also fined Tommy another £81,000 to be paid on the 7th of January, as well as this heinous torture. This is barbaric. Exactly. If you already charged him, and as I said, do a penalty charge, okay? Do house arrest for civil offenders. You can't put them in the same place as a criminal convicts. You shouldn't have this situation. It's just embarrassing for the whole country, for the whole Western world in general. Gwen says prisons normally allow prisoners to go to hospital if they require treatment. Tommy appears mentally ill and physically, by the way. Should therefore be sent to an NHS mental establishment. So they tend to wait until it gets to the boiling point, whether it's physical or mental, until they actually stop using the internal medics in the prison system and they send them out. I mean, if I were Tommy, I would, because the problem Tommy has is that he always puts on a brave face, and because he's a fighter, and every time someone goes to visit him, he's always like, I'm fine, I'm good. But you can see he's not. And if it were anybody else, they would have had a breakdown and they would have been taken somewhere else. But ironically, despite what the political left says, that, oh, well, look at all these guys and Tommy, they're always like playing the victim card. And Tommy hates to play the victim card. Tommy tends to become the victim, but he doesn't call himself the victim. He continues to be a fighter. Shouldn't matter if it's Tommy or Jack the Ripper. Human rights is human rights. Farage, get a grip. Well, yes, I agree. So if we say we have equal or a certain level of standards for everybody, all the prisoners, regardless of the level of crime, basic human rights in terms of, obviously, are you still breathing? Are you alive? Are you fed? then doesn't matter if it's Jack the Ripper or a civil offender like Tommy, you should still treat them the same way. But the thing is, everything has become more polarized. So when you have some people on the right would say, I don't know, if some creepy man looks at a child in a creepy way, but he hasn't actually touched the child yet, they're like, no, basically hang him, right? Or send him to solitary confinement, not feed him for like 10 years. Then that polarization also goes the other way around. They say, okay, well, in that case, we're going to call everybody far right, and then we're going to do the same thing to the far right people. They dehumanize you, and then they say basically that. And then if you complain, they say, well, do you want to do the same thing? I'm like, not really. There's still a difference between a pedo and a civil offender. They don't get it. They use it against us, but they don't get it. Cynthia says, does Starmer really want to rival Hamas for cruelty? He's out Hamas and Hamas, right? Yep. And Luke says, Labour has made Tommy a popular global superstar with the mischief. He isn't a household taboo name anymore to many. Not only, well, Luke is absolutely spot on, not only he's no longer completely a taboo name that he was 10 years ago, but they have made him even more famous. Because by the treatment and everything else that they have imposed on him, and the whole state in general, the British state, he then went on Jordan Peterson's channel and many other more mainstream conservative leaning people. But back in the day, no one would have thought that they would, like for example, Jordan Peterson would interview Tommy Robinson. That would be weird to even think about that. This is what happens when the truth comes out. People are doing their own homework. Stu says Tommy is a victim of his own strength. Yes, well, he's becoming his own worst enemy by putting a brave face on. Again, he can't help himself because he's a fighter. He could get stubborn, and now this is his situation. You know, if he asks for help, again, it's difficult to see what's going on right now in his head because he's being tortured, but he keeps trying to be strong. But any moment he could have had a mental breakdown. But don't know what the prison would do. And he would say, Starmer is making a bigger fool out of himself. The world is laughing at him. Many are wondering what he fears by Tommy being free. Yeah, the thing is, they have managed to contain the narrative using the British mainstream media. When you look at the mainstream media, GB News, BBC News, Sky News, they continue to call Tommy a kind of radical, hard right, dangerous person. Which is kind of interesting because if you talk to actual far-right people, actual ethno-nationalist people, they hate Tommy, obviously. They call him a Zionist, they call him a, grifter or whatever. So he gets attacked by the far-right and he gets attacked by the establishment. And neither side look at each other. So the establishment, they don't pay attention to the fact that they don't really ask, why is it that the actual far-right attacking Tommy? And the far-right people don't actually look at the establishment saying, okay, we're calling Tommy establishment. Why do the establishment still attack him? So both sides are being stupid, both the ethno-nationalists and the establishment in general. Crazy people. Now, Andy says, he is a hate preacher. Agent provocateur. That's the thing. Obviously, when you can't debate someone, all you have to do is just dehumanize them. Don't treat them like a normal, equal human with different views. Just basically call them names. That'll be easier. Well, you think if you're someone like Andy, that's how you think you're winning the argument. Well, you won't be winning the argument because there is a clear definition of what hate preaching is. Saying something that you find offensive is not hate preaching. You do realize anything someone could say that you might not agree with for you could be hateful, but that's a subjective opinion, not a reality. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll keep you guys posted on this. Again, big thanks to 2CTV reporter Niak Robani for going to Geneva and delivering this letter to the United Nations. Again, not that they'll do anything about it. And of course, David Atherton for sending a letter to the British government directly as well. And Rupert Lowe, the Reform UK MP, for also getting in touch with the Ministry of Justice. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Maya Tusi, and we are the media.